CNN had a town hall last night. My colleague Don Lemon hosted. And toward the end of the show, he asked the question, are you afraid to talk about race? Here's what happened.
I'd love to be able to talk more openly about race, but I've seen the disdain when I've tried. How many of you are afraid to talk openly about race? Nobody.
I'll say yes.
Mark your mic. What?
I'll say yes, and here's why. Because I'm white, and I'm going to screw it up somehow. And when we try and talk about race, and I have these built-in insensitivities that are seen by the black community, anything that I say is going to come across from my filter, and it's going to be seen possibly badly. So am I afraid about it? I'm afraid of screwing up, though I want to have the conversation.
About Mark O'Mara admitting that. And Don brought up the point concerning Mark O'Mara. We know him defending George Zimmerman. He spent most of his career fighting for the civil rights for young black men. And then he is afraid in the midst of all this. So what about you? Are you afraid to talk about race? We're going to take your calls, 1-877. Tell HLN is the number. You can go to our Facebook page, post your comments there. You can tweet us, tweet me, at Michaelanos, HLN. Our panel weighing in here as your calls are lining up. We welcome back entertainment journalist Holland Reed. Also with us, great attorney Lonnie Coombs. All right, Holland, I'll start with you. You were nodding there as you heard Mark O'Mara. Are you afraid to talk about race?
I'm only afraid to talk about it when you're really digging down to the root of it. I'm not afraid to talk about my personal experiences. I'm not afraid to talk about it from my perception. I have a very different experience with race than my own son does. My son is very dark-skinned. When we're out in public, people look at it differently. So it's definitely depending on the person, I think, an individual. But when you're starting to talk about people's experiences with race, their own personal issues, then they project that onto other people. Then there comes the fear to not step on people's toes and to hurt people because they don't want to then, you know, like he was saying, speaking through a filter, they don't want to disrupt that in some kind of way.
And that's the sad thing. If you're so fearful, I'm not saying Mark O'Mara is, but he hinted at that. You're too afraid to talk about it. No one is going to talk about it, honestly, right? Lonnie, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I have to say I really appreciate Mark O'Mara's comments because I've had so many people say the same thing to me. Look, I want to be open to this discussion. I want to learn. I have every best intention. But I'm afraid that I'm going to say something that comes across offensive. I'm going to say something that sounds stupid. I'm going to say something that then makes people not want to listen to me when I really want to try and learn. And I think everyone comes from a different experience. Just like Holland said, we all have different experiences. No matter what race you are, even within your same race, you're going to have different experiences based on where you live, your family, the color, the shade of your skin. And so the more that we can openly share our own personal experiences, so that other people can listen honestly and openly without jumping on you, without judging you, and say, look, we want to understand each other's experiences so that we can get on the same page as where we go from here.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, I'll say this. I think we need to have a heart that wants to understand and not quick to judge to both of your points there. Right. And also a heart of grace. If someone says something that may offend, or we need to say that. You hear me? This is why I'm taking it. And then continue the conversation so that we learn as opposed to you just go, oh, I think he's, you know, and then the conversation stops, and that's what we see.
The filters slowly have to come off for sure and start looking at it from an educational standpoint as opposed to taking every single thing so personally, because if you say something to me, you might not really intend to hurt my feelings. You're just speaking from your own experience.
All right. Let's get some calls in. The calls are lined up. Hans is with us in New York. Hans, are you afraid to talk about race?
No, I'm not, actually. I think every situation really gives you an opportunity to discuss not just the issue of race, but the issue of privilege, really, which is really at the core of the issue of race. I think also one has to be able to look at the socioeconomic components of every situation. One thing that I would like to add is that very clearly, for African Americans who have gone from slavery to what I would call an economic depression, those have been, by and large, the reality for African Americans in this country, and that needs to change. So that's the real issue. It's the really socioeconomic component that we have to really address.
Okay, again, more of your calls are lining up. Paris is with us in Kentucky. Paris, you afraid to talk about race?
Yes. Yes.
You are afraid. Why is that?
Yes. Well, yeah, I've never considered myself racist. I'm Caucasian, and I have, you know, dated. I have relationships out of my race, and I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. I'm scared to death. This breaks my heart. I always considered, the man or the woman their heart and soul. And now I feel like if I say one thing, it's going to go one way or another. And this has gone way too far. You can't speak from your heart, or you can't say anything because you're afraid you're going to say the wrong thing.
Hey, Paris, thanks for the call. That's it.
Yeah.
Eggshells. And to her point, it's heartbreaking because you want to say something, and if you go askew, to Mark O'Mara's point, you kind of screw up a little bit. Can't we just be told?
There's got to be flexibility.
Yes.
Where is the flexibility? Yeah. Where is the forgiveness factor, like you were saying, the grace in the conversation? It's lost.
Real quick, Lonnie, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely, on all sides. As therapists, when they're doing therapy, they'll have like a stick or something. They'll give each person the stick, and they get to talk openly, and then they pass the stick back and forth, where each side gets to say what they want openly without judgment. And it would be nice if we could kind of have that kind of discussion on race with every different type of person.
Hopefully we'll get there.
With no
Hopefully
sticks.
We'll get there. Yeah, exactly. Good point.
Yeah,
there.
keep the sticks
Who knows
out.
how
Yeah,
somebody
right.
uses it. Well put. Lonnie, Holly, guys, thanks again so much. Welcome back. Here's the question as we're taking your calls. 1-877-TEL-HLN. Are you afraid to talk about race? Here's another voice to hear. 350,000 times this has been shared on Facebook. It's Minister Jonathan Gentry saying, stop marching and start changing. Let's listen.
What we're doing out here is not helping. Change is not going to come until we change it. All we know how to do is march and riot and loot. This is not helping. Let's change as black people. When is this going to stop? When? How are our children supposed to grow up when we out here acting a stone fool? Let's get it together. Let's get it together because this is embarrassing.
Again, Jonathan, 350,000 shares on Facebook. Let's get some reaction to that. Again, we'll take your calls. You see that? Does that anger you? What do you think? Because there are some people I saw on Facebook that were angered by that.
Absolutely. I can see why they would be angry by it, but here's the thing. Get mad, get angry. You don't go out and prove to them that you're the animals that they're calling you. Don't feed into the stereotype. He's right. You have to change. It's not going to be just through rioting and marching. That only lasts for a very short amount of time. The change comes through education. The change comes through voting, through taking a stand in your community in leadership positions. It's not going to be by throwing, cocktails at police officers and turning over, cars in the street. That's a limited, visceral reaction to your emotions in this situation, but it does not affect real change.
Let's go to the phones. Robert's with us in Maryland. Hey, Robert, your thoughts?
Yes, hi. My name is Robert Harvey. My thought is what we're appealing to the police about, what we're mad about, is the fact that the police don't do what they proclaim to be there for, which is to protect and serve. They're not protecting and serving our community. Kendrick Johnson, that was rolled up in the mat, Trayvon Martin, and now Mr. Brown have all been killed by the police. Well, the Kendrick Johnson child wasn't, but they didn't solve the crime. Where do our children have to go to be availed of the authority, where the authority will protect them? That's the question I want to know. I have fled persecution in Georgia myself. I'm a grown man. I paid over $10,000 for the law to protect me. They did nothing.
All right. Robert, thanks for the call.
They persecuted me.
We have time for one more call? Real quick, Sharon, Oklahoma. Sharon, go ahead, about 30 seconds.
Yes, I'm a white female, and my ex-husband was a black American. My son is mixed. I have dealt with a lot and what's going on in Ferguson. I was a security guard on Fort Hill, and I had to take every test on everything we had on our hip. So I do not understand why all these black males, especially when they have no weapons.
Sharon, thanks for the call. We have more coming up. Stay with us.